Welcome to the Community Warehouse. This is Imran Mawala, and we're very excited. We have a special episode in store for you today. We have all the way from the UK, from England, Ayesha Miah for you. She is currently a assistant head teacher and soon to be deputy head teacher, and currently, going to go into a lot of her background story, go into some of her early struggles, go into her journey, and she's very acclaimed and accomplished in her own right. She has a BA with honors in politics with economics from Goldsmith College. She also has a MA in African and Asian history from SOAS University of London. She is a qualified teacher and holds qualified teacher status from the Institute of Education, and she has national professional qualification for senior leadership, and she's doing a lot more. So without further ado, we're going to bring in Ayesha Miah. How are you doing, Ayesha?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
No, our pleasure. Obviously, our very own Jasmine Begum highly recommended that we talk to you. So very excited to talk to you and learn more about what makes um, the UK style a little bit more special. Obviously, we have a primarily American audience, but obviously our country and our system derives directly from England. So it would be really, really nice to learn more about your history, your journey, and I know that there are some very fascinating background pieces that we should be aware of. So, before we go into some of the questions, could you tell us some of the demographics about the area that you serve in?
Well, I serve in Tower Hamlets, and Tower Hamlets has a significant Bangladeshi community. It's one of the most dense Bangladeshi community within the country. And within that, you've got high figures of deprivation. In the same time, you've got areas like Canary Wharf that actually are very affluent. And so you've got polarization between rich and poor. You've got high levels of unemployment within the community, lots of children dependent on free school meals. We're looking at overcrowded housing conditions. So students that actually come from tough conditions. And I myself grew up in Tower Hamlets. I attended a school in Hackney. Though I don't work in the exact area that I grew up in, the demographics are similar in many ways. So yeah, for me, I've been within that community for a long time. I don't live in the borough anymore, but that is where my roots are from.
Could you place us, geographically speaking, if we were to look at a map, where are we talking about?
So if you're looking at United Kingdom and you're looking at London, so Tower Hamlets is in London, and really it's bordering the city. So Tower Bridge, London Bridge, we're talking about a matter of minutes to get there. So very near central London.
Wow, amazing, amazing. So to get directly into it, right, you're going to be starting as a deputy head teacher in June, and you've been in the field of education for quite some time. Talk to us about, just give us a high level summary of that journey. Maybe talk to us about when you were in uni, what inspired you to want to study the subjects and the fields that you studied, and why did you become a teacher in the first place?
Okay, so I started at the school that I'm currently working in as an assistant head teacher in September 2021, and on the leadership team, I was the only female woman of Muslim faith, of Asian background. And within less than 2 years, I was lucky enough to be promoted within the same school. And I was only recently appointed as deputy head teacher. And for me, it was just really satisfying to see how colleagues from across the school responded. It was actually breaking through barriers they hadn't seen. Within that school, you don't see a lot of middle managers and middle leaders from our community, from our background. And suddenly this person came along and was part of the leadership team, breaking down perceptions of what people might have. And I was fortunate enough to be successful to be deputy head teacher. So it was really, for me, a great joy to see the joy within the colleagues from school. But I started off in a school in Hackney, and I never wanted to be a teacher. I never thought I'd be a teacher. And life has its own journeys, really, and you go where you're meant to go. I never planned to be in the school that I'm in or work with the students that I'm working with, but that's where I'm meant to be. That's where my destiny was, and I really believe that. I don't know where I'll be in 5 years' time. But when I was in school, I went to a school. The year I left, their pass rate was 25% A star to
Wow.
C grades. Now that's the benchmark. 25 5 A star to C grades, 25%. And I was one amongst those 25. I didn't get amazing GCSE results, but I managed to be within that cohort. And so I went to a school where it wasn't a high achieving school. Those were some of the barriers that I faced. I grew up in an area where I lived in an overcrowded living conditions. I have no shame in saying that. At the moment now, I'm privileged with how much space that I have. But I grew up in a 3 bedroom flat with lots of family members, and for as long as I can remember, I lived in within an extended family setting. Whether it was uncles living with us, whether it was my grandmother living with us, whether it was my sister-in-law and nieces living with us, but the family setting was full of warmth and love, and there was a huge community spirit, and our neighbors, and there was lots of potentials. We lived as a community, and I had the best childhood ever. But the barriers were when it comes to wanting to study, it's not like I had my own space. I shared my room with my grandmother in my teenage years. So when she wanted to go to bed, the lights needed to be switched off. It's just fair enough. But we always had guests in our family. We always had our home was like open door policy, people coming over, people staying over. So that was my context, full of opportunities, but at the same time, those were barriers. But I remember in school, it was when I was in year 10, the school selected 20 students and they took us on this university trip in Essex University. It was a program called Choice Program. And it was about motivating students. And I think that was a turning point in my life.
Mm.
Those we went on a residential, and I remember coming up to the residential. My dad was like, "There is no way you, a young girl, are going to go away and stay away from home." And I was like, Dad, when I was in primary school, I wanted to go on school journey, and you said boys and girls can't go. Went to a single sex school, girls only school, and suddenly it was like, nope, you're a young girl, teenager, can't go. But it took a lot of begging and pleading, and he let me go. And that actually changed my life because those couple of days that I stayed away, there was university undergraduates there, and the whole objective was to motivate us and to inspire us. And when I recently applied for my job as assistant head teacher in the current school, I actually wrote about my experience at that point because that was a turning point for me. The fact that I was inspired, the fact that I suddenly came back and college was just a goal. I could just think about university and life beyond. And it really changed me. And this is something that I focus on now for my students now. Like every student will go out to a university, will go out on trips because it's about inspiring them so they've got a longer vision, and if you've got a vision, you aim for something. So for me, that was a key turning point. And after that, it was going on to college, which was a stepping stone. And I remember when I was doing my university application, I don't actually remember anything about the UCAS process and the support process. That's the university colleges admissions systems. Currently, I work with the sixth form, and we invest so much in supporting our students with their whole process of inspiring them, sending them out to universities, learning about different courses, meeting undergraduates, like preparing them for their tests. I remember nothing about my process. What I do remember is to apply for Oxford or Cambridge. There's a 2 month, October 15th deadline, 2 months before the other deadline. And a week before the deadline, I decided I was going to apply to Oxford University. And so I actually went to my careers teacher's home. She from school. So again, it's like we have these barriers, but there are individuals that really make a change. And I remember going to a house in Croydon, a Michian, and she wrote my reference, and I sent off my application. And because I was on this target achievement program and I referred to all this aspirational stuff, I actually got an interview, not because of the grades that I carried with me. I don't know why, but I got an interview at Oxford University. And I remember my dad at that time, even though I was the first in my family to get a degree, and first amongst the community in lots of ways, but my dad was very supportive, and it was like a family trip. So when I went off to my university trip, my dad and my grandmother took me, left me. I had to stay with her for 3 nights. When I came back, my brother and someone else came and picked me up. So there was a lot of like joy about it, but no one had prepared me for that interview process. So when my students currently, where they applied for Cambridge, I was getting support from like business sponsors and other people and undergraduates and preparing for this. No one prepared me for that process of actually going for the interview. And then a rejection letter landed on my doorstep in December. And I remember feeling really gutted. And
Mm.
to this day, I feel a little bit of regret that that never happened. It was never meant to happen. I actually thrived in Goldsmiths, and I really had a fantastic time when I ended up at Goldsmiths College and met lots of friends and lifelong friends. And it really opened me up. And maybe I believe that God's plan that I was meant to thrive within that community. Maybe I would have drowned within the Oxford community because it's just beyond my depth. Having aspirations is one thing, but I needed to prepare, and I wasn't prepared. And I went out to Goldsmiths. It was a smaller community, and everyone knew me, and I was able to thrive. But that was kind of my educational journey. I can talk more about work, but I realize I've been going non-stop for 10
No,
minutes.
no,
I'll let you have a go.
no, it's amazing. I'm drawing parallels. So, I grew up in similar circumstances. We grew up in Chicago, very similar study to London. I've been to London 6 or 7 times. Very, very similar dynamics. I shared a bedroom with my grandmother, my nanny. Um, so very, very, very interesting. And I actually went into the field of education myself, but not intentionally. It was, I hate to say, a little nefarious. It was, I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. I was always a good student. And my last year in high school, I was class president. So I was class president of the high school. I got a very good relationship. I had a very good relationship with a lot of the teachers and the English department head, and I became very good friends. And he said, like, you're a natural. You would do good in the classroom, and you get summers off, you get weekends off, you get all this ample free time off. It's a good job. It's it's a high school system you're familiar with. So when I got to college, that was kind of the intention. Like, this is what I'm going to study so I can get this job. I never went through with it because as I got older, I realized I didn't want to teach high school, and I stayed within the field of education, but had a completely different mindset. Then eventually went to Saudi, taught at a couple universities in Saudi, and came back, taught at a community college in Chicago. But similar, like, you have some of those aha moments as someone who's from a younger person or from the youth, and then you get to then instill the same values in your future generation of students.
See, mine is a little bit different in the sense that I would not now leave teaching for anything. I think at that age, when I was thinking I want to be a lawyer because I can speak well, I can debate, I love debates. So I'm going to be a lawyer for a big firm. I'm going to be flying around the world. That's what I wanted to do. And then when I got to college, I realized, no, being a lawyer isn't enough. I'd like to be a politician. So I'm going to do a degree in politics and economics. And then you realize, actually, no, with fame comes a lot of struggles. And I decided that's not what I want to go into anyway. And as a graduate, to be honest with you, you apply for jobs and it lands you in one particular field or another field. But I initially was involved in this organization called Windsor Fellowship as an undergraduate management program. I was one of those like hungry, greedy person that would take up any opportunity. I'd read all the posters that were on at university, and I'd go to all the sessions and do whatever I could. And actually, obviously, that had lots of advantages for me. But I remember one of my dad's friends who came to my house and he had a conversation with me, and he's like, "There's a job coming up for an education social worker. Apply for that." And so I applied, and I didn't get the job because there were other people who had experience. But the borough then said, "There's another role. Come in, work with us, and there'll be opportunities coming up." So in a way, though they couldn't offer me the role at that time, because there were people that were working within the field that had better knowledge. So I worked as an education social. Went in, got the job as an education social worker, and did that for 3 years. And to be honest with you, I feel like not going directly into teaching and working in other sectors has given me a huge advantage, because I've worked in lots of different fields. I've worked with early years services, I've worked with social services, I've worked around attendance for 5 to 16-year-olds. And it was when I was an education social worker for a school in Tower Hamlets that was at that time in special measures. It was in a bad situation. You couldn't walk down the stairs or walk across the corridor without being shouted at. And the students it was a school that was in a bad state. But I think when you go in a setting like that, you could really make your career, because any change that you make at that point has a huge impact. And an opportunity came up. I think it's a very rare thing. I've got to say, alhamdulillah, it's just Allah provides in funny ways, but in mysterious ways. But an opportunity came up, which was a post on the leadership team for a project that was externally funded, but it wasn't a teaching position. So I went into a school because they knew me. I worked within that school as an education social. I'd done it for 2 years, so they knew me. And I took that job. So I was on the senior leadership team, but I wasn't a teacher at the age of 25. Now that's something that's like almost unheard of to be on a senior leadership team at that age. But I'm one of those people, throw me challenges. There's nothing I love more than a challenge, and I'll find my way out. And it was at the end when that project came to an end, and there was a new head teacher who had started, and it was a 3-year post. And I remember when I left my job as an education social worker, there were people that were saying, "You've got a permanent post, you've got security, and you're throwing this away for a 3-year post, which higher position, but it's temporary." Took that challenge. I was able to at that point in my life. And when that contract came to an end, I started to apply for jobs, and I had an interview as a head of widening participation at Queen Mary University. And the head said to me, "Don't go for your interview, stay." And he said, "Stay and become a teacher." And he said to me, "It's a good profession, and it works well with family, and you'll have children, you have all these holidays." And actually, I stayed. It was one of the most challenging years of my life when I did teacher training and was paid full time on SLT salary, senior leadership team salary at the same time. Huge challenge, because any teacher that's going through teacher training year will tell you how difficult that year is. Whereas I almost have like two full roles, and almost like being a baby of an organization, being a new teacher, and being as a senior lead of an organization at that same time. So it is quite bizarre, my life, my journey, and my experiences. But that's where I was, and I stayed within that school actually for 15 years. And though it started off so fantastically well, in that role, I was there for 15 years before I moved on in 2021. And
So I'm
again,
going to I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go for it.
I'm going to put you on the spot because you brought up a good point, which was before you joined the profession in the field of education, you had other roles, and you spoke briefly about how that benefited your transition into education. And I've experienced something similar where actually I feel that my time in education has benefited the roles that I have now and the roles that I've had post teaching. So if I were to ask you, like, what are maybe 3 or 4 skills that you were able to develop or hone as a non-educator that benefited you as an educator, what would those skills be?
I think there are like basic skills, like being able to work collaboratively.
Sure.
There are generic skills that you need to be able to work collaboratively. Whether you're an educator or not, you need to be able to build links with people as you're going along, establish those relationships, and then you build on, and it's a community that you build around you for support. So I think able to collaborate is really important. I think the skills of like looking ahead and planning ahead, having a vision, that's whether you're in education or not. Those kind of skills are really important, because you need to be able to plan ahead and then build the steps towards it. And again, you've got your generic skills, like your communication skills, time management skills. Those are basic things that you need to carry along with you wherever you go, I think. And so many skills are transferable. Like, I mean, my current new role that I've taken on, I've never led in that area. And some people said, "We thought you might not get the job because you haven't led on that." But actually, if you go from one job to another where you've already have led on that area, where's the challenge? Where's the development? And those people procrastinate sometimes and think, like, "I've done this already. There's no stimulation." Whereas for me at the moment, like, my mind is like buzzing with like ideas of what I can do, can't do, and it all comes from transferable skills from doing other things.
And my esteemed colleague and co-host Habib Qadri is joining us. Habib, you're on mute, so feel free to unmute yourself at any point. And and we have with us Ayesha Miah, Habib. So fantastic to have you both on at the same time.
Assalamu alaikum.
I don't know if you can you hear us, Habib?
Again, I apologize. We had a. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Okay. Yep. All good.
Can you hear me?
So yeah, Habib, you can just jump in, and I did have one question. So Ayesha brought up earlier that one of the aha moments she had when I believe she was in year 10, was a field trip that they took, and that really instilled these values of wanting to become an educator. Ayesha, the next question I have for you is, okay, now you've transitioned into education, you're in the classroom. what was maybe one of the first aha moments you had as an educator working with students and realizing the benefit that you could have, in their lives?
I don't think there's a moment as such.
Okay.
I can't think of a moment where it's kind of like come to me. But when you go in the classroom and your objective is one for in terms of the educational outcomes. So if you're teaching a subject, you need to make sure you teach that properly so your students get the grades that they need, because that's the money, that's the currency that they'll use for the life opportunities. But the other thing I do also say is we are educators, and my objective isn't just to get outcomes. So when I speak to my students often is, if my child was a good human being and didn't have brilliant grades, I'd prefer that to having a child that had fantastic grades but wasn't a good ethical human being. So what we're educating, the two sides of it is, yes, let's get their results so they can get ahead with their lives and achieve their ambitions, but let's make good human beings out of them as well, because you can't really do one without, we can't achieve success with doing one without the other.
So I guess great answer. I think what I'm getting to is, you brought up another fantastic point earlier that resonates with me, which was you brought up the example of applying for Oxford and not getting in, but everything happens for a reason, right? And then there's a friend of mine who's actually from London as well. He's an educator, and we talk about this all the time. That our parents migrated to this country, and there was so much that they had to do just to fit in. They had to worry about getting jobs, had to worry about providing for their families, and sometimes larger families. So they don't have the time and the nuance to understand the things that we may understand now, right? As second or third generation American Muslims and British Muslims. So my question to you is, what are you doing? Having the perspective that you have, what are you doing in your local population with your students? I think, like you mentioned earlier, about 35 to 40% of the borough is Bengali, or 35 to 40% is Muslim. So what are you doing to undo some of those stereotypes that may be instilled from their own families, right? In terms of things that are like ceilings, like you'll never become this, or you'll never be able to reach to this, right? So what are some of those things that you're doing?
So in my last role, key focus of the role was around parental engagement, and the remit was around community and parental engagement. I actually was very kind of active with getting parents involved from every step possible. Because if you want to make a change, and if I go back to working with early years, if you want to make a change to a person's life, I've got a 3.5-year-old. The passion for reading, the passion for literacy, the passion for, like, the playing is learning. There's an early years curriculum, and parents need to be on the go from that stage onwards in terms of being involved and doing things that are right for them, feeding them the right food and making sure they get a balanced and nutrition meal, rather than filling their stomachs up with, like, endless quantities of sweets and and a poor diet. So in my last role, there's a lot of work around parental engagement, getting them through transition points when they come from primary school to secondary school, and looking at what the school looks like, what the transition will be like. Each time, whatever the community focus on, it could be that focus on internet safety, it could be a focus around well-being, it could be a focus on mental health, um, different things at different points. Currently, my focus is around sixth form. So I lead on the sixth form, Key Stage 5. So this is a key point from 16 to 18-year-olds and them getting to university and fulfilling their dreams. And I think for this role, there's less around parental engagement, because parents want to be less involved when children are at that age. Well, certainly for this community that I serve, it's a big challenge. Like where I live, the parents are forever on the case. They do the vast majority of the job for us educators. But I think it goes back to aspirations, knowing that there isn't a barrier. So I've got a planned program, and last year, um, actually, yeah, around October last year, we had 5 speakers coming, and they were millionaires, people that have come from different backgrounds, but have got through to where they've got to without necessarily going through one set pathway. So in a way, when you inspire students to think, I've actually failed at this point, I haven't done very well. But these people have come and they said, well, I did this. One person, and they're not all from our community, they're from different communities. It's about inspiring people. And one person's like, I sat in the same exam room as my brother, who's a year younger than me, and he aced his results and I flopped. but the guy went on into IT and did really, really well. So people go and succeed in different ways, and it's exposing young people to those role models. With year 13, when I have them move on and their graduation ceremony, I've brought in keynote speakers who are established people who've come from the community and have actually done really well. So what they need is role models. They need to have role models, and they need to aspire and see that there are barriers. We are underrepresented. There's lots of different types of barriers. People in different areas have a huge advantage in comparison to us, but yet there are people that have moved on. I mean, in the UK at the moment, we've got a prime minister who's of Indian background. We've got mayor of London who's of Pakistani background, and now we've got the first minister for Scotland who's of Pakistani background. So really, like, even though we've got so many barriers, these people have actually gone to the most senior position within the UK. So it's actually exposing the fact that we can do it.
Amazing. Habib, I see you. I saw you at different points nodding your head. So please add. Because obviously you're a educational leader in your own right, superintendent, former educator of the year. So what's resonating with you?
Yeah, I think the points, it's so important that a lot of times in our communities they focus on the cognitive and the academic success, but the idea of kind of focusing as it was brought up regarding this whole thing of idea of just being a good person, a good character. I mean, which is part of our deen, and just have good akhlaq. And I think sometimes as parents, they lose sight of that, especially now than ever before. You have a young age, making sure that academically, a lot of parents in preschool, pre-K, they're like, can my child skip a grade? Look, they know their ABC, 1, 2, 3. So I'm like, yeah, their cognitive abilities might be there. That's also one-on-one. But what about the gross motor skills? What about the social skills, the emotional skills? So that aspect. And then the second part, which is so very important, is the idea of parent engagement. And I really appreciate that the time and effort that you are putting to build that relationship with parents. Even at University of Chicago, the consortium, they had this seminar in something 2012 or 14. And what they did research on about 200-300 Chicago public schools, right? There's about 550 Chicago public schools. And they were trying to figure out what meant success from one school to another school. What were some of the underlying? And no doubt about it, there was, student centered learning, teacher capacity and the professional development. But one area aspect that was very important was parent engagement, where they realized when parents are involved in their child's lives, not just from just making sure that they are just knowing that what information is happening, but being involved in how they become better parents, what they need to do to engage, to really making sure they're having conversations with parents. So I think those were just kind of resonating just to hear, because those things kind of manifest into bigger things and life skills. Again, I apologize today for coming late, but in the mornings we have a class called Boys to Men course, and today we did experiential learning. So we went and build, to how to build a fire, and then how to make a tent. So a one-person tent, a 4-person tent, and 6-person tent. So I apologize because we were outside and started raining, and we were trying to kind of get everything done. And so by the time I wasn't able to get back out to the home. So I apologize, but I thought let me jump in. But just kind of hearing this end of how important this other aspect of kids is amazing. So this is good to hear. I know I'm going to have to kind of talk to her on the side a little bit more, but I just wanted to just kind of, it was just what you were just saying was like, this is what we really have to kind of hone in on, especially now than ever before, from now, teaching our kids that tarbiyah, and the idea of to making sure we want to teach our kids the moral compass that we want our kids to have. I think it's important. So, yeah. So, sorry. So let me keep on listening. I'm gonna say.
No. Go ahead, Aisha.
I was just going to say, Brother Habib, Brother Imran was doing a fantastic job. So I'm happy. No need to apologize to me.
No, thank you. No, it's a pleasure to have. Obviously, Habib, you're doing your thing on Saturdays with the boys, which is very needed. So we'll take you whenever we can get you on, brother. And Aisha's doing a fantastic job at just explaining this journey to other educators. And Aisha, you touched upon your history, your family dynamic to some extent. You talked about the parents. Well, now that you're an educator, you're talking about how you're getting the buy-in from the parents. You're talking about how you are changing things for your students. What have you noticed about buy-in from your fellow educators who are maybe not Muslim or not Bengali over the years, where you've now come in, you've broken barriers, you showed them a new way to do things. You don't have necessarily an education background, so you brought some of that nuance, some of that other perspective into the field of education. So, what have you noticed about the buy-in from your other educators over the years?
I think in terms of like talking from a leadership perspective, I feel like I'm very fortunate that where I am currently, the head teacher is very open to thoughts and suggestions that I have. And my current school actually has a very inclusive culture and atmosphere anyway. But I think generally where we all know we're educators and we're here for the well-being of the student, and we want the best results for the students. Now, in terms of from a leadership perspective, you've got to create roles to ensure, and you've got to ensure that those needs are met. So not just the education outcomes, but outcomes on every level for the holistic development of a child. Now, for me, the key issue is not every educator is in the same position. There are some that will go in, deliver, and come out. There are some that will go over and beyond to support students. And what we can hold them to account for is actually the basic expectations that we have for teachers. And that's where actually at the moment my whole focus is on in putting structures in place. So if you are a teacher in the school and this is the expectation, that there's a structural procedure of monitoring and reviewing and evaluating and challenging and holding people to account. And where, for example, in a certain subject area where the results are a concern, for me, how can I then recruit for my sixth form knowing the child will go into that subject area and will not get the best results that they need to get to? Would I put my own child through that? And if I'm not going to put my own child through that, then it's not ethical, it's not right to then recruit someone else's child and put them through that failure. So as a leader, my focus has been a lot on bringing people to account. Again, when you bring people to account, there is the issue about you want to bring people to account, but you've also got to support them because people work, people are struggling, people there are CPD needs. You've got to make sure there's support in place and structures in place to first support and then support and more training, but also then being really monitoring tightly to make sure that what needs to be done is being done. And we all know, like if we're not monitored, then things slip a little bit. And I use the example with my students about laws. Laws are there to be followed, but where there's not a speeding camera, you will exceed that speeding limit, even though you know that it's there for your own safety and it prevents death and it minimizes the impact of accidents. And but we will speed. That's how it is. If we know that there isn't a camera there, we'll park. We're not meant to be parking. So you need that monitoring system in place, because if you're not monitoring, then things slip. And when things slip, it's those young people that go out whose life chances are taken away. And that's for me, that's criminal. That's what we can't let happen. We've got to make sure it's all about the young people. That's what we educators do.
And it's an interesting point, and I don't know if this is your mom, Aisha, but I think you have a fan in the comment section, so I'm putting it on the screen here. So, somebody's showing you love.
I'll have to find out afterwards if it's my mum or my mother-in-law
Oh,
or a fan.
It's
Or it
amazing.
might be actually my children. I don't know.
So you said it could be your children.
It could be my children. I think my boys might be listening on downstairs.
Mashallah.
So,
What were you saying, Ali?
Dr. Aisha, I just had a question is regarding, when making sure that to bring accountability to staff. I know one thing I realized, especially in the Muslim school sectors, I think a lot of times I've seen where you have a lot of administrators where you might also live in the same community, and so a lot of them are not just your teachers, but they're also community members, right? And then the idea of how to still kind of separate that idea of like, okay, I still have to evaluate you, tell you what you need to do, and kind of separate. And how have you, just tips for others, how do you navigate those situations where you're trying to make sure that, hey, we are giving them tips, evaluating, making them better individuals, and at the same time keeping that climate culture, that relationship separate from private life to the school life, where I sometimes get to hear from that many evaluators. And especially, I think for me in my field, there's not too many, guys might be in the education field. I might have, like, out of my 110 staff, I think like 10 are guys. But when you have sometimes a ladies administrator, and you have, like, my principal, she has like 75 individuals who all maybe live in a 10-mile radius. So just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. When as an undergraduate, I was working at W.H. Smith's, and I remember, so you're just a cashier then, like it's an undergraduate job, the student job, and I remember the managers would never mix with us because we were left to socialize, and the managers kept away from us just because so they don't blur those responsibilities. In my last job, the head teacher, he was very, very strict. He terrified everybody, be it parents, students, staff. But when he had a social event and the team would go out for a social event, he would let his guard down. I could say whatever I wanted to say to him at that point, everything, just let it out. And he would take it and he would laugh over it. No issues. Come back the next day, you're back to business. It's not that friendship blurs that line. And I feel like I've learned a lot from that. We learn from people along our journey. So my current head teacher, I feel like he doesn't want SLT, senior leadership team, mixing with staff as much because you don't want to blur that line. But I think what we've always got to remember is the more senior you go, it can be a very lonely world if you're not going to mix with everyone else. You're one of them rather than us. And I feel like we're all human beings, and I don't see people in ranks. I see as human beings, and I'd like to have a laugh and a joke and talk to everybody on the same level. But regardless of what that relationship, like that professional relationship where someone needs to be held to account, we need to do it, and that person needs to know that's part of the professionalism. And even within that friendship, they'll know we're friends. And I've actually got friends from my last job who are now lifelong friends. One person was she worked as my admin support for my project. But 17 years on, I know now that I've left and we keep in touch. We'll keep in touch for a long time because we work together, we can socialize, but where we need to say this wasn't right and you shouldn't have done this and you should do this differently, and we're talking about capability, then we should be able to say that, because you need to be able to distinguish between the two roles. And if you can't, then it will be a very lonely life, to be honest with you, because you're forever not part of the vast majority.
So I just was noticing, Aisha, like so many correlations. So like I actually wanted to become a lawyer as well. That's one thing I was studying for. And then I actually worked for, it used to be called W.H. Smith, but for us it's called Hudson News. So I worked at Hudson News as a cashier as well.
It's funny, isn't it?
The track of an educator. So, my question now is that obviously you have this breadth of experience, you have a lot of educational credentials, you're on your way to this new promotion in June. What are the hopes and wishes going into the next 3 to 5 years?
2 years ago when I went for my interview, I remember I'm going to get there in a long-winded way. There were three. First panel was 3 white middle-class male, and each introduced themselves and said, "I'm this person, former head teacher. I'm that person, former head teacher. I'm this person, former head teacher." And at the end of the interview, they of course knew my name, so I didn't need to introduce myself. But at the end of the interview, I said, "By the way, I'd like to say I'm Ayesha Miah, aspiring head teacher," and left on that note. And they actually then pulled me back to say, "Can you explain why you sat in one school for 15 years if you're an aspiring head teacher?" And I was ready to answer that question, so I did. To be honest with you, right now, I am so proud to have achieved this deputy head job. I hope I do this job well. I know for the next 3 years, definitely, unless something changes, I'd like to carry on doing that. I'd like to be a deputy head in another school to add to my breadth of experience. Maybe in 5 or 6 years' time, I'll seek headship. But again, things might change at that point. I'm not there just to seek titles. I'm there to seek growth for myself and job satisfaction. So this is where I'm sitting at the moment. Say within 5 or 6 years, I'd like to be applying for head teacher positions. But if I feel in 5 years that I'm quite happy where I am and I don't want to be a head teacher, then I don't need to be a head teacher. So go with the flow and see where life takes me.
No, we appreciate that. I think it's been a phenomenal episode, and we've learned a lot. We'd love to have you on again. And Habib, unless you have any other questions, I think I'm going to give Ayesha the final word and let her close out this session.
Great. Yeah. No, I think thank you so much for this opportunity. Again, I apologize for my delay, but I know for sure. I might be coming up into England in July. So if your school's still in session, we'd love to come and visit. So.
Absolutely.
And before we let you close it out, we found out who Mum was. So here I'm going to bring it onto the screen. It's Shazna M.
One of my daughters, I think. Oh, my mum.
Alhamdulillah. No, yeah. So please, give us any closing thoughts. And again, one more time, it's been a pleasure. Always an honor to meet fellow educators and to learn from your story. I think your story is phenomenal in terms of the population that you came out of, and then the population that you're serving, and with all the opportunities that you've had to stick to education it's a big testament to what drives and inspires you. So amazing story. And something before we let you close it out, just want to remind everybody that Habib and I have designed a free teacher training tool. It's available via app. It's also it's available via a mobile app and via a web portal. It's called dlpacademy.com. We have over 500 users. We have over 300 videos with forums and so many other features. So please give it, check it out. It's completely free. There's no strings attached. And Aisha, I pass the baton on to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I was a little bit nervous about coming on a live program, but alhamdulillah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. And of course, I've learned much today as well. I'd just like to say, like, every person's experiences are different, and we all grew up in the same household, same community, siblings even, our experiences are different. And the only thing I just feel my message to everyone is have aspirations, aim high. It doesn't matter if you don't kind of achieve what you needed to achieve at that point, because there is a bigger picture. And I honestly believe that Allah plans and you'll end up where you need to end up. And just kind of like keep on picking yourself up and trying your best. Aim high, try your best, and that's it. Keep going.
Ayesha Miah, future deputy head teacher starting in June. We appreciate your time. And for those of you who joined us, please do subscribe. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and share the content as we're highlighting the stories and journeys of educators. And we mean this from the bottom of our heart, Ayesha. We'd love to have you on anytime you have time, and we'd love to have you here more regularly with us.
Inshallah.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for everyone that joined and all the comments that were left. We have your nieces also commenting now, so you'll have some comments to respond to.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.